Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to whomever you are and wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Hitt Inn, your croquet local, serving a full selection of croquet-related chit-chat by me, your landlady with a glass of red, half full. I'm Alison Maugham, on a mission to sneak behind the scenes of croquet and find out what life is really about on and off the lawns. A quick disclaimer to you all, this may be recorded in one session and may not have been edited, so definitely not one for children. Swearing and strong opinions will no doubt feature somewhere along the way of this podcast journey, but hopefully the useful and interesting bits will make up for it. Let's open up, get started and see what's on the specials board today. Right, here we go. Again, our special guest today is David Maugham. Welcome to the bar.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
For the second time. I will point out to our listeners that Alison neglected to press the record button the first time round.
That's one.
So we've already gone through the first 20 minutes of this, So we'll see what happens the second time round. Whether I give the same answers or not.
Well, only you and I will know, and I probably wasn't really listening.
Well, really.
So it'll be fine. Okay, here we go. For this discussion, we are going to cover leaves. And I thought we would cover the following: handicap leaves, standard advanced leaves, super advanced leaves, third turn leaves, and 3-ball endings. 3-ball ending leaves. So there are around 8,500 members of the Croquet Association here, and obviously many players across the world, and not all of them, in fact probably quite few, play advanced or super advanced. So I would like to talk about handicap leaves for those people, because the way to get better, and what we hope, is that handicap players will move on to play advanced and super advanced and come to tournament play. And the way to get better is obviously to make better leaves along the way, to start playing better opponents. So let's start with a very simple handicap leave. What are you trying to achieve?
Well, I mean, it's a very broad topic, because you are covering how many bisques are you giving? How are you receiving? Are there very few bisques involved? What is your standard of play generally? I mean, the advice I would probably give to a 12 playing another 12 is going to be radically different to the advice I would give that 12 playing a handicap 4 or a handicap 16. They're all very different situations. Clearly, as a basic principle, then be joined up and with your opponent split up is the first thing you ought to be considering for any sort of leave. But yeah, after that, how joined up you are, if you're giving away bisques, is going to be radically different, and how sort of aggressive you are is going to be radically different. I mean, I, as a -2.5, am usually having some sort of a leave where my balls are 7 to 10 yards apart, because most of the time my opponents have lots of bisques, and therefore I want them to have as difficult a time as possible using their bisques. Whereas Well, I mean, to some extent, the opposite it also applies is that if you are a high handicapper and you've made your first break and you have lots of bisques left, you don't need to be particularly aggressive with your leave, because all you're doing is making it more easy for your opponent. You can just go, well, I've got lots of bisques and I'll use 2 of them to set up my break, because in almost all circumstances you can set up a break with 2 bisques. So
you've made 12 hoops as a handicap player. You've still got a bunch of bisques left. You can stick balls in corners.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then Oppo shoots at something, anything. Maybe he joins up.
Yeah.
Maybe shoots at you, uses a few bisques, doesn't really get anywhere.
Well,
potentially.
if it's a full bisque game.
Yeah. And so you can then come on, use your 2 bisques to set up your break, and
away you go and finish the game.
So let's discuss leaving balls in the middle of the lawn.
As a bisque extraction technique.
Well, everyone always says don't leave the balls in the lawn.
Yeah, no, that is general perceived wisdom that you don't leave your join up in the middle of the lawn, and certainly when you get into advanced leaves, it's very rare that you will deliberately join up in the middle of the lawn. But if you're playing a handicap game and playing against somebody with a lot of bisques, or at least some bisques, then joining up in the middle of the lawn with the intention that either they shoot hard through you and have a 7-10 yard return rotate back at you, or they dribble at you and have a much smaller chance of hitting in the first place, both of which are designed to get more bisques out than you otherwise would manage by just joining up near a boundary.
Got to ask the question, what is the difference between doing a leave and being an Aunt Emma?
Generally, the intention. What is the intention in the turn following the leave? If the opponent misses, if it's to have a break, if it's try and make lots of points, then you're not an Aunt Emma. If it's to make your 1 hoop and then go and split the opponent up and do the same again, join up at your next hoop, then that is an Aunt Emma.
Have you ever been an Aunt Emma?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Yeah, I mean, when I was handicap 12, I was only 16, and 16-year-olds are not really well known for their cautious approach to any form of sport, I don't think. So yeah, no, even when I was playing other handicap 12s, I don't think I ever deliberately went out of my way to not make as much progress as I could at any given point.
When did you get your -2.5?
What, first time or
first time ever?
First. I can't remember when the handicap system. It used to be that the bottom end was pegged at -2 for a long time. And maybe 20 years ago, the bottom end was unpegged with a exponential scale for getting to lower and lower handicaps. And I would guess I was -2.5 within a season or 2 of that happening the first ever time. Since then, I've bounced backwards and forwards. Some years I'll spend longer at -2.5, and some years I'll spend a lot longer at -2.
But you don't tend to play handicap play.
Pretty rare.
In competition.
Yeah, I mean, I play. Last couple of years, I played club handicap tournaments since since the birth of Ben, and our life has changed a bit somewhat, so we spend that bit more time. And also, due to COVID, I've had more holiday time than I would perhaps do normally because of holiday time carried forward from 2020. So spending Wednesdays at the club on club days was much more of a thing, and therefore I'd play handicap there. But
winning the club roll up over the season is a bit cheeky as a -2.5.
Well,
do you think?
Maybe, but I'll just turn up and play the games. I can't really. I mean, there's you get.
You think you won because they're all scared of you?
Not particularly. I think some people made errors, perhaps, that they wouldn't have otherwise have done because of who I am. But these are people who've got huge wads of bisques that they could use to beat me, and indeed I was beaten several times last year, and indeed I'm pretty confident. I can't remember who it was who beat me, but I'm pretty confident that the game I did lose this year, I didn't take croquet in.
Oh wow. Okay.
It might not have been sixth turn, but I might have had like 2 or 3 shots in the middle of it, but I didn't hit any of them, so I didn't do anything.
Get anywhere. Okay. So let's move on to standard advance leaves. So advanced play, when you move on from handicap tournaments, let's say, and you want to progress, you then start to play advanced level, which is, so it's level play.
Yeah.
And you have the introduction of what's called a lift hoop, or lift hoops, when your ball goes through either 1 back or 4 back, your opponent will get a lift. And so there are more leaves to be had probably or more structured leaves to be had in advanced play. So let's run through very quickly, top level, what the different leaves are called.
I mean, the most common leave that is made is going to be the diagonal spread. It's good for almost all of your clip positions as the person making the leave, whether you're 1 and 4 back, 2 and 4 back, 3 and 4 back, 4 back and peg, penultimate peg, any of your clip positions, a diagonal spread will work. Sometimes it has to be sort of flipped around so that you're laying upon the west-hand side of the lawn. But as a general rule, if you can make it one way around, you can make it both ways around. So that as a leave is just the leave that you ought to practice making, and understand how to make it in the first place, but then also how to give up relatively gracefully and do something that will give away a shorter shot, but not necessarily a 9 or 10 yarder. If you fail to get the ball by the peg and it has an open shot at the ball over by hoop 2, quite often that is only a sort of 9 or 10 yard shot. Whereas if you go, well, I'm too far away to be guaranteed to putting that on into the spot that's wired, I'll just poke it back between 3 and 4 and have an OSL.
Standard leave.
The old standard leave, which is pretty much the most basic leave that you can make. That involves having your balls with some sort of rush up the lawn out of corner 4, and the oppo balls roughly peg high between 3 and 4 and roughly level with hoop 6, somewhere near the boundary beyond near hoop 2. There shouldn't be any shots shorter than 13 yards with that.
But clearly knowing when to give up is probably a good thing to learn.
Well, indeed, which is why I say that you ought to practice it and understand where it can go wrong and how it can go wrong. For instance, if you're putting the opponent ball to its spot on the peg across the line that is wired, that is more difficult to do than if you're putting it up the line that is wired, because it can stop in. It's got a very small area to stop him in the first instance, whereas a much bigger area in the second instance. So trying to be in a position where you're putting the ball onto the wired spot from a position that's already quite close to that wired line is handy. Again, the distance you've got to move it comes into play. Are you moving it a yard, or are you moving it 6 inches? If you're moving it a yard and you have to stop it in a space that's maybe only 2 inches across, then maybe you should be thinking about doing something different. Whereas, and clearly, as you get closer and closer, you're more likely to do it. So those are your choices, really. Trying to get better at it.
Okay, so that's the diagonal spread and the OSL.
Yeah.
Then we've got the NSL, new standard leave, and the MSL, Maugham standard leave, because you get a leave named after you.
This is known as the 2-4 leave in a lot of the antipodes, I think. The leave just got named after me, not really because I invented it or anything clever like that. I just did it of the three sort of top players that were around in this country in the 1990s. Rob Fulford, Chris Clark both did diagonal spreads 90% of the time, and I would be doing an MSL. Probably more. I'll be having a go at one probably 99% of the time when I was for one and fullback.
Why do you think they didn't do the MSLs more?
I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, they would do them some of the time. I mean, I think they just felt they were good enough at delayed triples that they didn't need to take maybe the additional risk of having of trying to be putting a precise ball that is only at the end of the day 8 yards away from where you're laying up.
Because of course the advantage of NSL/MSL is that in theory, when Oppo misses, you can end up with a standard triple peel ahead of you.
Yeah. With the diagonal spread, if the opponent lifts either of their balls and shoots down the east boundary, then you're probably going to be doing a delayed TP. And even if you're going to go for the Hogan roll, which is the roll out of fourth corner, putting a ball to 3, going to a ball at 2, you've still got partner at hoop 2, which just makes life that bit more difficult. The NSL has the slight advantage that if they lift the ball at hoop 2 and shoots down the side boundary, then you have the big sort of stop shot drive out of fourth corner, getting a rush on the ball by hoop 4 to get your standard TP. If they choose to lift the ball at hoop 4 and shoot down the boundary, then you have a very similar position to a diagonal spread. The MSL, with the ball tight to hoop 2, has the advantage that you're making hoop 1 off partner, and therefore partner will naturally go to hoop 3. The disadvantage of that is that you potentially don't get quite as good you can't give yourself a sort of 1 foot dolly rush pointing at hoop 1, because that would be a double from B-block. So it tends to be a 2 foot slightly cut rush.
Just quickly about doubles. When we say leaving a double, what is a double? What do we mean by leaving a double?
Well, a double will be generally any situation where the opponent has more than a single ball to shoot at. So it might be that you try to leave a rush pointing at another ball, but because you get the front ball slightly off to one side, they can see maybe a ball and a half, a ball and a bit more. Obviously, to the extreme, if you have fractionally less than a ball's width of gap between two balls, then that is a full double target, and that is at an angular level is twice as big as a single ball target at the same distance. So functionally, you're just giving them a shot of half the distance.
And just out of interest, because it may have happened to me once or twice in the past, I maybe make two back, scrape three, but it's all got a bit wibbly. I'm probably not going to make three back, or I'd end up in the jaws or something silly. So clawing out an OSL at that point, that's not terrible, is it?
No, I mean, if you've really run out of position, then I mean, making a leave for one and three back is better than sticking in three back, giving the opponent all the balls.
And also as a player coming up, so not actually at TP level.
Well, that's another factor, is how good you are at TPs. If you're good at TPs, then you're much better off being on one and four back than you are one and three back. You're much more likely to finish. So,
but if you're just coming into tournament play, advanced play,
yeah,
and you're finding things are a little bit hairy, then actually, and you're probably not intending on doing a triple peel, then actually it's still it's still 3 turns. You're finishing in 3 turns. Yeah. So whether you end up on 3 back or 4 back sort of doesn't matter.
I mean, well, in most leaves, in normal advanced, you are trying to make 2 back off partner, which does mean that if you get to a position where you aren't easily making 3 back, the chances are you've made 2 back without a sensible rush somewhere. So you might not be in a very good position to be getting that ball in the fourth corner. So, which, I mean, I'm not saying that that's necessarily. Sometimes you'll end up with a position where you've made 2 back off an oppo ball and the other balls are just all over the place. And yeah, okay, giving up, because at least you've made your first lift hoop, which means that you can then go to peg with the other ball, which is.
And what about the other leave?
That's the reason we're talking about leaves today.
Well, it's not the only reason we're talking about leaves, but there has been a little bit of a hot topic about leaves on the back of the commentary of the McRobertson Shield, where the vertical spread was made, and
was attempted.
Was attempted, and you didn't approve. I think
I'm not generally a fan of vertical spread.
Why? Are they difficult? They do look difficult.
They're more difficult to make. And if you get it wrong, you give away a much shorter shot. So if you fail to get the ball wide behind either Rover or Penot, especially if you fail to get the ball wide behind Rover, which is the more difficult one to get, then you end up leaving a sort of a 9 or 10 yarder, which is usually not a good thing to do.
But when could it be a good leave?
It has some merit in situations where the opponent is not for it. If the opponent has polarity, so if they are 4-1 and 4 back, you want to encourage their 4 back ball to play, because that way, if they hit in, they can't finish. So there is some merit certainly in putting the 4 back ball on Penalt, on the basis that they're much more likely to want to play with that ball, whereas a leave like the diagonal spread is less forcing in that respect. The ball by the peg, when you are yourself 4 back and peg or Penalt and peg, the ball by the peg is a little bit more encouraged to play, but less so than a vertical spread.
So when do you decide what leave you're going to do? At what point do you decide? So let's say you started the game, you've started at hoop 1, all the other clips are hoop 1 as well, you're tinkering around. When do you start thinking, this is the kind of leave that I want to make?
Well, as a general rule, you will have I would expect people to have a favourite leave, more or less regardless. So you go into the game going, well, I like to do NSLs, so unless something happens, I'll be doing an NSL. Clearly, you also have the actual, well, you start playing, and if you let's say you go through hoop 4 and you look at the ground round it and go, my word, that's got all sorts of old hoop holes and it's horrible, and actually getting a ball to stick in the in the sort of space that I want it to be in is going to be really difficult. Maybe I won't bother. Maybe just the conditions, maybe it's just that bit faster, or it's the hoops are that bit more tricky, and you'd go, well, the chances of me getting control over hoops is small enough that I won't want to be trying to run 3 back by only a foot or 2. Just in case, because if I stick in that, then that's not, it's not good. But so you can, those sort of things will inform your decision whether or not you choose to carry on with your favorite leave, or whether you choose to do something else is very much down to the actual conditions on the day, and what your personal preference is, and how you fancy playing that particular game.
Very quickly, slight side tracking off here, but when you're in doubles, what's your opinion on leaves in doubles? So you ask your partner what leave would they like, but if they say a vertical spread, let's say, I don't know, it could be anything, and you don't necessarily agree, what do you do?
As a general rule, my general view on doubles is that you play the way you would play a singles game. Clearly, that sort of changeover period where you're doing what your partner wants is going to you are then doing something that you might be out of your comfort zone. So
if we were playing, you would prefer an MSL, and I'm going, well, I prefer just to make my hoops and stick my clip on 4 back.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of it is that the person on the lawn has to make the decisions about what they're doing, and my do what you do in a singles game philosophy is tempered by yes, okay, I want a particular leave, but you're playing, you know how you're playing, you know how it feels to run hoops at this, so you do whatever you
need to do to get the job done.
Need to do to get the job done. Yeah, if you decide, yeah, okay, I wanted to make 3 back and I accidentally ran it by 2 yards, and therefore when I ended up rotating the ball out of position and we had an OSL, I'll go, yeah, okay, well, that is what it is, because you were the one playing the turn and you had to do what you had to do. Because I might have ended up doing the same thing in the same sort of position. So I'm not going to criticize somebody for failing to get an MSL every single time. So anyhow,
let's talk super advanced leaves. All of the leaves we've discussed are still valid leaves in super advanced.
Yeah,
you can still stop after one lift hoop, or
you will get lots of positions where you make diagonal spreads in super advanced.
But there's obviously the addition, which is the sort of the standard contact leave.
The contact leaves that you have to make. Now, the one of the big differences about super advanced rather than normal advanced is that the opponent's clips are much more important for the leave that you're making. So whilst there is a standard leave for 1 and 1v1 and 4-bag, that is, you will not make that leave if the opponent is for 1 and 2. And you'll make a different leave again if they're for 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or 3 and 3. All of those situations will require a different leave, because you don't want to be leaving a ball in the corner of their hoop, because that gives them a relatively easy chance to roll off their hoop more or less straight away and get going off the contact, which you don't want. So, having said that, the sort of standard leave, if you like, against 1 and 1 is to have the opponent's balls across corner 4 and your balls in corners 2 and 3. Now, I like to try and get it as tight as possible and essentially get the opponent balls in contact in corner 4. Basically, because of the two sort of lines of play out of from the contact are to either roll the ball that's in corner 3, which is usually the 4-back ball, into the lawn somewhere near hoop 1, going to the other ball that's near corner 4. Obviously, if that ball is 6 yards up the boundary, then it's easier to roll to than if it's in the corner. And the other line of play tends to be to take off from the ball that's near corner 2, take off from the ball that's near corner 3, with the intention of trying to get a rush on the ball that's on the south boundary. Because if you take off from the ball that's near corner 2, that goes out towards hoop 2. So if you do take off, although it's a small area to take off into because you're clearly toying with the boundary, then if you get your rush to hoop 1, and you've got a ball at hoop 2 and you go around, again, it's much more difficult to take off and get a rush to hoop 1 on a ball that's in the corner rather than a ball that's 7 yards in across the south boundary.
So when the clip positions are not just 1-1-1 4-back, general rule of thumb, balls near the hoops?
A ball near its own hoop, and if both your opponent balls are on the same hoop, then nothing in that corner. Now, they obviously, if the opponent is for 2 and 2, for instance, it's that bit more difficult to get a leave, because you will have had to have rushed a ball into a ball corner, and you have to get that ball to stay there. Otherwise, they get a very short rush out of that corner. So you have to be able to get a ball either in, well, almost always in first corner, because it's relatively easy to do that after 2-back.
It's of course worth noting at this point that if you're giving away a contact, they don't technically have to take the actual contact.
Correct.
They can take a lift.
Still take a lift.
Therefore, being able to rush.
They don't even have to take anything. They can just play the balls as they lie.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the contact leave is the most common addition in super advanced.
Yeah.
Then you can move on to more precision play i.e. something like the cross peg. So you might, for example, be looking at a sextuple.
Yes.
The rest of us won't, but there's a few of you who might.
The sextuple, I mean, well, Reg quite likes just having a diagonal spread because he's very happy to play the big roll out of fourth corner.
To set up the sextuple.
To set up his sextuple. So partner naturally goes to hoop 2. So after hoop 1, he will come out of and put that ball up the lawn somewhere as his escape ball. And then play a Hogan roll, putting a ball to hoop 3, going to his partner ball at hoop 2, with the intention of then peeling after hoop 2.
We, of course, didn't mention in normal advance the sextuple leave where you have the cross wire at hoop 1.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we'll go into detail about which balls go where, etc., and exactly where they go. But have you got any tips for actually those ball placements? So cross wire or cross peg, in my experience, it's virtually impossible, and I have no idea why. But
well,
how? What
as
sort of tip?
as a general rule, you want the balls to be as close as possible to where you want them before trying to. So when you're trying to play your last rush to get a ball into a cross-wired position, ideally it's already almost cross-wired to start off with, and you can organize that around where your placement of the other ball is, where you've rushed that to. So if you're cross-wiring at hoop 1, you will typically then be rushing back to it from hoop 6. So already having the opponent ball that you want to be on a slight angle across hoop 1, so not straight in front of hoop 1, for instance, because you can't leave it there. Then you rush down after hoop 6. You already know where the ball is and where you want it to. So you then try to put that ball into a cross-wired position from it straight away, so you then don't have to move it very far.
Who's the king of leaves, in your opinion, in the whole history of croquet?
Well, probably Rob. I mean, he's invented an enormous number of leaves, and is just very good at playing and getting them as well when he wants to. I mean, he's the one who invented the tight diagonal cross peg for the sextuple leave it in Super Advanced, which is the two balls cross pegged, but on the normal diagonal line, such that neither of them can see, and you lerp on the west boundary rather than the east boundary. As a consequence, there are no shots that put balls into fourth corner, which means that you can avoid, for the most part, playing the huge Hogan roll to out of fourth corner going to hoops 2 and 3.
See, I've always wondered if it was a bit annoying having Rob there just being good a lot, but actually, is it quite useful?
It gives you something to try and emulate and achieve, and when you beat him, it's good. So yeah, I mean, it's never bad to have somebody who's. I mean, I think during the 1990s, the three of us were all pushing one another, me, Chris, and Rob, just to be that bit better, and yeah.
Okay, the third turn leaves. So let's, for example, say you hit your third ball on the lawn, and you hit, and you, I don't know, maybe make a hoop, maybe don't. at this point, let's not worry about whether any hoops have been made or not. What sort of leaves can you do at that point?
Typically there's only one leave you're really trying to do, the so-called dream leave, which is essentially a diagonal spread without a ball at the peg.
So you've got a rush to their ball.
You are laid up on the east boundary with a rush to their ball, which is a yard or two off the west boundary.
What if it's a really heavy lawn? Can you put the ball further into the lawn?
You can. I mean, at the end of the day, the ball that ball can be sort of anywhere. I mean, I've seen people, especially off the second corner opening, if they haven't got the pass roll to put a ball sort of level with hoop 6 whilst going somewhere close back to their east boundary ball, what you can do is simply play a full roll, putting that ball still on the diagonal line, but 3 or 4 yards, well, maybe 4 or 5 yards short of your partner ball.
So,
and then all you need to give is some sort of roquet on your partner ball, and avoid giving away a double from either bulk.
Is this the three ducks?
Well, it sort of is, only it's on the other side of the lawn.
But so the three ducks leave tends to be on.
The three ducks leave tends to be
the west.
On the west side, yeah.
Okay.
Roughly.
And why would you leave the three ducks rather than the dream leave?
Because it's easier to play a full roll rather than that split pass roll for some players.
Right. Okay. So then this is a shot preference.
And you don't need a rush on partner at all. You just roquet it, play your croquet stroke, putting it to getting a rush on this ball that's 5 yards away.
Okay. Finally on my list were 3-ball ending leaves. So in advanced play and super advanced play, it's fairly common for a player to take their opponent's ball off the lawn. So peg oppo off.
Yeah.
What are you trying to achieve?
Well, I mean, as the one ball player, you're not really trying to achieve leaves. So they don't happen.
No, but in that first leave, you've pegged your oppo off. What's
okay? Well, in
best
you've
leave?
Got the initial contact leave. In a lot of instances, you're basically leaving a contact leave when they're for hoop 1. So you're putting one of your balls in second corner and the other one will be going on the east boundary, approximately level with hoop 4, fractionally north of the line of hoop 4 and hoop 1, such that hoop 4 is in the way of getting that ball to a yard or so in front of hoop 1. So they've got a choice between aiming to go a foot in front of hoop 1 or going 3 yards in front of hoop 1, which is the best you can sort of do at that point. The problem with that leave as it is that if they fail to get in front of hoop 1 at all, then they take position and there's a ball sort of somewhere between hoop 1 and hoop 2 and a ball in second corner. So as the 2-ball player, the best you can probably do is put the ball that's in the middle of the lawn back into fourth corner, and they get another go off what is called the squeeze. So they run hoop 1, hit the ball in second corner, approach hoop 2. We're hopefully getting a rush to hoop 3, make hoop 3, make hoop 4 off the ball that's in fourth corner, and they win, and you've not had any sort of go at doing anything. So to counter that, what sometimes happens is that the player pegging out the opponent will also try and peel their hoop 1 ball to hoop 2. As a consequence, they can.
Oh, so you're starting on hoop 2 and peg versus hoop 1.
It doesn't make the contact turn much more difficult. Typically, what the leave is a ball near fourth corner and a ball in third corner. The player can then either take off from the ball near fourth corner and roll over from third corner to in front of hoop 2, or they can roll down from fourth corner, leaving a ball somewhere near hoop 3, and then rolling across from corner 3 to hoop 2, depending on lawn speeds and various factors. It doesn't make that turn isn't significantly more difficult than the contact turn when for one and box. What it does take out of play is if they fail to get in front of hoop 2, then you can just run away to say corner 1s, and they have very little, even if they run hoop 2, and at best, because they've rolled down, there's a ball by hoop 3 that they can hit, but there's also a ball in corner 1 which is completely behind their break. So there are advantages. Clearly, it does mean that instead of doing a TPO, for instance, you do a TPO with an additional peel involved, just to add to the sort of complexity, if you like.
But that, that's going to happen as people progress. You play advanced, you play super advanced, and you trying to achieve different levels of play within that.
Yeah.
And making it as difficult as possible for your opponent might be peeling them through 1, 2, or 3 hoops. Well, I mean, depending on their level of play as well, I guess.
I mean, in the first break, especially if they are already 1 and 4 back, and you may feel like you don't fancy doing a TPO if is it the first turn of croquet you've had in the day. Who knows? Maybe you just don't fancy it because if it goes wrong, it's really bad, and the conditions are difficult enough. But you can do what's called pops, peels on the opponent, and that, whilst it doesn't necessarily change the game massively, if you can peel them through 1 and 2 whilst you're taking your ball to 4 back, they're now on 3 and 4 back.
And you can choose alternate leaves.
And you can have a different leave. Normally, it's a leave which has their 4 back ball roughly level with the peg on the west boundary. You're in second corner and just out of second corner. And their hoop 3 ball is somewhere in the corner 4 to hoop 4 sort of area on the side boundary. And where exactly you put that it depends a lot on how likely you feel they are to play with that ball. Because if they lift that ball and shoot at you in second corner and miss, then if you're reasonably good, that gives you a reasonable start to your own TP. So they're more likely to feel like they ought to be playing with their 4 back ball.
Wow. Well, that was a big discussion on leaves.
Well,
no Ranty.
No, well,
No.
as I mentioned before we started, you're not going to get me to rant about it because it's going to be obvious when you try and get me to rant about it. So, I mean, technically, we haven't really discussed the leaves as the 2-ball player in a 3-ball ending after you've got past the contact leave.
Well, I think we might have to create another special if people really want to.
If there's a requirement for that.
Exactly. So I'm gonna finish our chat with a quick fire.
Oh, we'll go. Right.
Q&A. So my first question: when were you ranked number 1 for the longest period of time, and how long was that for?
2005, and probably a couple of months, I would have thought.
How many times have you been number 1?
Not very many. plausibly only 2 or 3 times.
Okay. What's the missing titles?
World Championship.
Just that.
I
Anything else that you would really, really want?
Well, I suppose the New Zealand Open for the full set, since I've won the English Open, the US Open, and the Australian Open.
Okay. Live streaming, what are your thoughts? And do you think it's going to help our sport develop?
That's an interesting one. One would hope so. But it's a little difficult to really judge how much of a promotional tool it is. Clearly, in terms of getting people invested in tournaments that are being held in different parts of the world, assuming the time difference isn't too great, then yeah, I mean, clearly recently we've had them at Robertson Shield, and it's such a massive change, I think, from when I first started playing in it in 1993, where, I mean, you wouldn't have even had emails back about what the progress was. Nobody knew what was going on in the Robertson Shield pretty much until the next Gazette came out. And yeah, as time has gone past, we've had the Nottingham board. People have emailed about. We've had the advent of commentary in various forms, either on web pages or even just by email. And now, yeah, live streaming is the next step. We have got more or less consumer level equipment that is capable of broadcasting this stuff to the world.
I think if anything, it's definitely brought the community together.
Yeah, you certainly then get a feel for actually what's going on 12,000 miles away, depending on.
It was great. It was just great. I loved every second of it. But
even, I mean, you get things like the GC Worlds last year as well, where, I mean, the Egyptians, I think, felt like they could actually see the progress of their players. And I know you got a lot of positive comments from that as well.
We did. There was a lot. It was, yeah. And it was great that we were able to include so many different people in the commentary. And I think that the Australians in the MAC have done the same, but improved it still.
Yeah.
They have set the bar high.
They have, but I mean, as an observation, clearly they spent a lot of money getting a professional outfit
who were amazing
to do that. They have the technology and the expertise. When we were doing the GC Worlds, and I say we, I mean, I had some peripheral involvement in understanding how all the technology works prior to the event.
When we set it up in the back garden.
When we set it up in the back
so
garden.
I could learn how to use it from Eugene.
There is a big learning curve for the operators using the CA's equipment, but on the other hand, the CA owns that equipment. I mean, whilst I'll call it consumer level, it's still 10-20 grand's worth of kit, and it's the CA's, and it can be used more or less for free at any event that the CA wants to use it at. I think the next time it's going to get an outing will be next year's AC World Championships.
Well, I think, but I'm also hoping that other events will get in touch and hopefully try and live stream some of their events, because that's the point, isn't it? Now we've got the technology, let's start to use it and get involved.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a bit of a you've got to pick your events to some extent, and there is a there is a large volunteer effort required to man the cameras and and do the commentary and make sure all of the technology works. It's not as simple as just somebody setting it up and leaving it to go. It's you need people to operate it all the time.
It's a huge volunteer effort. It's true. So aside from live streaming and commentary, how do you think we can grow our sport?
Throw the cat amongst pigeons, but I think we need to understand our target market better and to advertise to them more effectively. There is a lot of emphasis putting on recruiting youngsters, which certainly I think has a benefit in probably making us more likely to win world championships, because as individuals those players tend to get really good. If we want to keep croquet alive, we need to be recruiting 50-year-olds and keeping them till they're 80, because they are essentially the bread and butter of club level croquet,
and can be competitive, because in croquet you can get good quickly and be playing against the thing is players quickly.
You get there are the people who used to play more fast-paced competitive sports, but they feel maybe their reactions are going and they don't want to play tennis or football or rugby or whatever. They want something a bit more maybe mentally challenging than bowls or golf. They want to maybe have something that's a bit more outdoorsy than snooker or darts. So it's finding the intersection of those people. And the 50-year-old typically is his kids have left home. He's typically he says as a 52-year-old with I'll be 53 in a couple of months, but
with a 3-year-old.
With a 3-year-old, yes, okay. My life is not typical by any stretch, but yeah. So the 50-year-old who's maybe his kids have left home, so that pressure on his time and finances maybe is gone away, and he wants something to do. Maybe he played sports as a younger person and he wants to do something. And whilst I appreciate I'm using the masculine gender here, that is not to imply that this isn't true of women as well. There's a lot of competitive women about, and finding those.
So I mean, that's a huge topic and definitely not one that we should really start now. But
running out of time.
Yeah, but the subject of women in croquet, and we recently had the big question: why weren't there more women players at MAC? Well, if you look at club level, I actually think women dominate the lawns. I
think that's true.
That's in my experience anyway at the clubs that I've been a member of, and they are competitive. There might be something in there, is there a reason they're not going from being competitive at club level to coming into the tournament scene? But I think that's just a question that needs to be asked.
I mean, it's a difficult one to answer. I would say that whilst there are other factors in other sports that maybe don't apply to croquet, you could equally look at darts and snooker they are sports where strength is not a major factor. Therefore, there is no real reason why women can't be as good at the top level as men, and yet they have been dominated by men.
Yeah, a similar story.
So I mean, there are now women playing in the top level events, which wasn't really true 20 years ago. But there's a handful of them compared with the vast majority of the players who are still men. Is that to do with your typical club level darts and snooker, that those are treated as male preserves, maybe, and it takes a special type of woman to break through that historically male dominated area. But that's not really particularly true of croquet. Clearly, the club level croquet, as you say, it's probably dominated more by women than it is by men. So yeah, we have to wonder, is that change from club level to tournament level, is there something about that puts women off? Is it just the focus or drive of men is that bit more, and therefore they're just more likely to go into that? Who knows?
I think the problem is we have too many questions, not enough answers.
Way too many questions. Yeah.
Anyway, I think we should call it a day there.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's all right.
From me, thank you, and from everybody else who may or may not listen to this.
We'll see. Given that this is the first one, whether this gets any traction at all. Anybody listens to it, and we'll see if Alison can persuade anybody else to waffle on for an hour. We'll see where we get to.
I'm quite persuasive when I need to be. Okay. Thank you very much for everybody out there. You have been listening to the fabulous David Maugham, who also
I'm saying that because you're my wife.
Yeah, I know. And I am Alison Maugham, and you never know, maybe I'll be back for another one. We'll see.